Well, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm Jeff Sherman. We have Dr. Eric Lopkin. We're going to talk about issues as we always do. Key events of the week, what's going on, and our interpretations of that. Well, Dr. Lopkin, I think the first big thing, there was two huge things this week. One thing is someone who kind of grew up with Bill Cosby, even from his younger days, earlier days, I should say, being a little too young for I Spy, but seeing it in reruns. It was a breakthrough show, the first African American in like a key role, not just a kind of a ancillary role. And then obviously the Cosby Show, watching the commercials for Jell-O. He was Americana. I mean, he was an African American that transcended all races and the kind of guy you want to kind of hang out with. Do you agree with that, Dr. Lopkin?
Right. I mean, he was referred to as America's dad.
Yep.
And, at the time that the Cosby Show came on, sitcoms were actually in decline. He was credited as pretty much saving that genre.
Did not know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, he had this impact on people who never met him, but people that knew him very obviously now had a very different experience with him.
Yeah, and also I think what's interesting is that even in the 70s, you look at situation comedies with African Americans, and they were almost stereotypes, different strokes. And I think one of his big positive accomplishments is showing a successful African American, a doctor, that wasn't a caricature of African Americans. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's, in fact, what he's credited with, of sort of normalizing the image that people had of African Americans.
Yeah, instead of, this being like the Jeffersons, it was all almost ridiculous in retrospect.
Right. I mean, the Jeffersons obviously came first. They were the first to really show a successful African American family. But it was much more comedy than situation, if you're talking about sitcoms. Sherman Hemsley obviously played it for laughs, where Bill Cosby was trying to be more real with it. And I think Bill Cosby, the family on the Cosby Show, was something that all Americans could identify with.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. Now, let's talk about, recent developments. First of all, do you think, maybe, seems like it's a rhetorical question, but do you think that he was guilty?
I do. Unfortunately, I have absolutely no problem believing this.
Yeah, I would say I think there were troubles or problems with the trial, the current one. I didn't really, do a deep dive into it, but it seemed like there's, bringing up witnesses or references to past crimes, but not having them go on the stand. But I think when you have, like I've always said this, about sexual harassment, those kinds of issues, you could have one or maybe two nutcases that make a claim about anyone. When you have 10, 15 women, I find it hard to believe that they were in cahoots or in coordination with each other. I think he did it.
Yeah, and I have a little different perspective in that the Cosby Show was actually shot at the NBC studios about 5 blocks from my house growing up. And the NBC studios, you had the Cosby Show shot there. You had most of NBC's soap operas were shot at this studio. And there was always something different about Bill Cosby. The folks that worked on the soap operas, they came out. They, were at neighborhood stores and restaurants. Business owners put photos of them. Oh, Bill Cosby never was part of the neighborhood. He would show up in his car, go right into the studio, from the studio back to the car, leave. He had nothing to do with the rest of us.
What do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, there were always problems. When the show first showed up, people would go to see it. By, I would say, midway through the second season, they had people coming out begging folks to go into the audience because nobody wanted to go to the show anymore. And
Why is that?
Bill Cosby was very off-putting. And in fact, there was a casting call for friends of the youngest daughter on the show. And Bill Cosby made it very clear he did not want white children to apply. So, I mean,
interesting.
So growing up, this is sort of, I saw Bill Cosby on TV and listened to his, stand-up routines as this person, and the
that didn't really
impact
fit
he had
the
on
real
the neighborhood
image.
did not really fit that. So
it's really funny because that's funny too, because a friend of mine was talking about him as when he hosted or when he filled in for Johnny Carson at Tonight Show, was a real SOB, was not the nice guy that you think. He was mean to everyone, condescending, and had some problems with race as well.
Yeah, so unfortunately, when these accusations started appearing, it really didn't surprise me.
Well, I also think in closing that I don't care how rich you are, there are mental issues here. Okay? If you're doing what he did, and I do believe he did what he did, he could have gotten women on his own accord. He was a rich, successful, good-looking guy. There's something seriously deficient about his personality.
Oh, absolutely.
First of all,
when you're talking about drugging women, I mean, you're no longer talking about sex. You're talking about control issues.
Control, exactly. Like, there is no, I can't imagine what the, if you will, the sexual thrill would possibly be of engaging with someone that's basically passed out. I mean, it's all about control, about humiliation. So he had huge issues. And I guess the closing question is, do you feel sorry for him at all?
No, I don't.
Me neither. I think he had, in other words, I really feel sorry for people that are up against it, meaning, have problems economically, other issues that, that they're no fault of their own. He had all the options in the world, and he decided to blow it.
Right.
Well, Dr. Lopkin, until next time, always a pleasure.
You've been listening to Carnivore Radio's podcast. You can catch us here every week. Carnivore Radio is part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can listen to the podcast at blogtalkradio.com/Xvadio. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can listen to us live every Friday at 4 o'clock on WESU 88.1 Middletown, Connecticut. You can also catch us online at WESUFM.org. We look forward to hearing from you, and see you next week.